other religion, not Hinduism, not Buddhism. But this false equation has enabled the new atheist to get quite a bit of mileage. Now I turn to the rest of the world and I ask this question: is it really true that these conflicts around the world are driven by religion? What are the Israelis and the Palestinians fighting about? Are they fighting about God? Are the Israelis saying, you know what, we think Moses was the greater prophet? The Palestinians go, no, we're Muslims, we think it was Muhammad, and they come to blows. Is that what those guys are fighting about? No. They are in fact fighting about land. And similarly, the Hindus and the Muslims are fighting over Kashmir. And similarly, in Northern Ireland, the Catholics and the Protestants are not fighting about the Eucharist or transubstantiation. They are fighting over which group of guys gets to rule that country. Self-determination is the issue. There's a story about a guy in Belfast. He's walking on the street. A man jumps behind him and puts a gun to his head and says, Catholic or Protestant? And the man says, actually, I'm an atheist. And the voice behind him says, Catholic atheist or Protestant atheist? And the point of the story is religion is not fundamentally what's at issue. Now, I don't want to look at history. I'll come back to that. But I do want to say that while we hear a lot of incredible crocodile tears about the crimes of religion, crimes, by the way, that are often in the very ancient past, the Crusades 1,000 years ago, the Inquisition 500 years ago. If you read Henry Kamen's multi-volume study of the Inquisition, he's the leading living scholar of the subject, he points out that the Spanish Inquisition, over a period of 350 years, killed approximately 2,000 people. 2,000 people, 350 years. I'm not a math major, but it works out to about 6 guys a year. Not exactly a world historical crime by any standard. By contrast, not only the crimes of Christianity, but even the crimes of Islam pale when you consider the crimes of atheist regimes committed not in the ancient past, but in living memory in our lifetime, and they are still going on. Incidentally, I'm not just talking about Stalin in Russia or Mao in China or even the Nazi regime in Germany. Junior league atheists like Pol Pot. He doesn't make it into the top category normally. He's not even mentioned. Well, in Indochina, in the space of 3 years, he and his Khmer Rouge regime managed to kill about 2 million people. So what I'm getting at is that when you do any kind of a reasonable comparison, and by reasonable comparison, I mean if you want to hold the people who are acting in the name of God responsible for what they do in the name of God, in other words, if religion must take the blame for the crimes inflicted in the name of religion, let's be consistent and blame atheism for the crimes inflicted in the name of creating the atheist utopia and the secular paradise liberated from the shackles of traditional religion and traditional morality. So I want to make the argument now Richard Dawkins in his book The God Delusion jumps in here with an important qualification. He says, but wait a minute. The Christians killed in the name of Christianity. You might have had tyrants who happened to be atheist, but they didn't kill in the name of atheism. Now, Dawkins, as you know, is an accomplished biologist, but here I think you see the problem when a biologist is permitted to leave the lab. In other words, here is a guy with evidently no understanding of history. I mean, if you look, for example, at communist regimes, it is not an accident, as the Marxists like to say. It was part of the deliberate design of the regime. The whole idea is that religion, well, Marx in a complicated analysis called it the opiate of the masses, but what he really meant is religion functions as a kind of drug. It blinds you from social injustice. The true liberated society would get rid of it. And so it is not, as I say, coincidental. Every Marxist regime has targeted the churches, persecuted the priests, killed the believers, and so on. The atheism isn't incidental. It is part of the conceptual scheme from the beginning. Finally, I want to make this point. and that is that we're fighting a war on terror. I have 1 minute, I see. We're fighting a war on terror, and I ask this question. What is the best way to fight it effectively? I think this is an area where Christopher Hitchens and I are in agreement, which is to say that our mode of communication with the radical Muslims should not be in the form of a pleasant conversation and shared cocktails, but rather in the form of live ammunition. So where is the fortitude to take on radical Islam coming from? Is it going to come from secular Europe? Or is it going to come from a more muscular and a more religious United States? The Europeans so far have proved, well, let me just say that the Swedes recently upgraded their terror alert from run to hide. So Hitchens, I think, is about the only pugnacious secularist we have. So if we're looking for fighting the kind of theocratic menace that he sees on the horizon, I ask him, is it not a paradox, perhaps a tragic paradox, that at the end of the day, it's going to be the Christians who head to Iraq and the secular guys who come to Vegas? Thank you very much.
With your permission, I'll take Dinesh's points in, so to say, reverse order. The last one will be reverberating in your heads the loudest, I dare say. It was not I, the atheist, but Archbishop Rowan Williams, the head of the Anglican and Episcopalian Communion, who recently demanded that Britain adopt Sharia law, at least for its Muslim population, rather than face any more threats of terrorism or the inconveniencing of Islamic propagation and promulgation of extremist ideas. Now, I regard that as not an accidental concession on the part of a spiritual leader of the West. I regard it as first, very suggestive, and second, almost inevitable. There is something, to me at any rate, I'll simply have to state it, masochistic about Christianity. It wallows in guilt. It believes its adherents to be guilty from before they were born of original sin. If someone despises it, it looks for the reason why that contempt might be justified. And it proposes the hideous, the disgusting, the contemptible, the revolting, the dangerous, the suicidal idea, which everyone in this room must teach themselves to repudiate, that we should love our enemies. This is an obscene conceit. Dr. Rowan Williams, who does the most perfect impersonation of a Welsh sheep I have ever seen, can go love his own f***ing enemies. I don't want him loving mine. I don't want him telling me that I must learn to adore the misunderstood Al-Qaeda sympathizer. I don't want him saying in the name of his contemptible Nazarene ideology that I must give up my freedom, that the rule of law in the country of my birth is over, that there's a separate law for people of a separate religion, that we are not all governed by the same courts, not all by the same understanding, that anyone with a different faith can claim a different jurisdiction. That is moral and political and cultural suicide, and not to call it Christian would be to miss the point. Now, there are those who say that Buddhism is not really a religion, and I know that Buddha is not considered by his fans to be exactly a god. He was born out of a slit in his mother's side, which makes me suspicious. You notice how most religions seem to think of the birth canal as a one-way street. Something they abhor about the female genitalia. It puts me on my guard. All right, let them not say it's a religion. It's faith-based to me. It stinks of that.